Now we have the same transportation problem, but we're going to add an additional layer of complexity, and that would be that we have, instead of simply cost of transportation, we have the selling price, production cost, and the tax rate where the automobile gets produced, and we want to maximize after-tax profit. Okay, so let's first color code the numbers we see here. Okay, so these are the transportation costs. This is exactly same as what we have seen before. Okay, now these are the, okay, I'm going to change the format and take away the decimal places. These are the prices. These are the unit cost of production per unit. That's also given. And this is the tax rate percentage. Let's make it into a percentage. Okay. Now the tax rate is at the, as given at the plant, which is the origin. Okay. Now of course we want to determine the shipping plan. So we'll call this shipping plan. Okay. And of course the total shipped must be less than or equal to capacity. Just enter that. So that's one set of constraints. And total received, okay, the sum for that region, that should be equal to, so put an apostrophe and then type equal to, otherwise it will go into formula mode. Okay, so these are the constraints, but what about the after-tax profit to maximize? Now we have to figure out what would be the after-tax profit per unit for each transportation, and then we can multiply this with that. That will give us the after-tax profit. So here we start with the selling price. Now remember we have to copy this formula for the rest of the cells, so we have to use the absolute referencing in a judicious way. So now when we copy down to the different plants, okay, the price should remain the same, which means the row should remain the same. But when you copy across to the different regions, then the price should change to different columns. So the row remains the same, column should change, so the dollar sign should go to the row. Okay. And I need a parenthesis here to start with. Then minus the cost of production. Now cost of production, the column gets fixed, but the rows should change. So here it should be like that. Minus the transportation cost per unit. And that changes in column and in row, so you don't need to do any absolute reference there. So this is the per unit profit before tax. Now we have to adjust for tax, so there will be 1 minus. The tax rate is here. Now once again, the tax rate, the column is fixed, the rows change. So you have to do it like that. Okay. Now this will give us the after-tax profit per unit. Copy this way and copy that way. Okay, let's clean up the borders a little bit here and give a name. Define name. After tax profit per unit. Then the total after tax profit is just some product of the shipping plan with unit after tax profit. Now that's our objective function to maximize. Okay, let's give names here. Okay, now let's run solver. Want that to be maximized now. Changing cells, and the constraints are same as before. Okay, change that, solve, and we have a solution. Let's change the format for this, and we'll get rid of the decimal places. So that's our after-tax profit. Now, if these demands are assumed to be minimum demands, okay, in other words, that if we can supply more than the demand amount given here, then we will be able to make that additional profit. If that is the case, then we can change the constraint, the demand constraint, instead of being set equal to the demand values, we can change that to greater than or equal to. So if this is true, if these demands are only the minimum values and more shipment than the demand will be able, we will be able to sell those additional shipment, then we can change this constraint into a greater than or equal to constraint. Now, of course, that will increase the profit because now you are selling 300 more units than what the minimum demand is. So in that case, these constraints are now greater than or equal to constraint. So whichever is the valid situation, so you need to use the constraint in that fashion. So don't use equal to all the time, or don't use greater than or equal to all the time. It depends upon what is appropriate for a given problem.